A pair of twin girls found a millionaire's wallet and asked to adopt them within a month. A few days later, the millionaire received a call that made him pale. Ashley's fingers tightened around the black leather wallet, the smooth texture foreign against her rough, half-frozen skin. It wasn't bulky, but it had weight, an undeniable presence, like something that didn't belong in her world. She turned it over in her palm, the embossed initials DV barely catching the dim glow of a flickering street lamp. Beside her, Haley shifted uneasily, her breath misting in the bitter night air. "Open it," Haley urged, voice hushed but firm. Ashley hesitated, then flipped it open. Neatly stacked bills, crisp and untouched, lined the inside. A silver credit card peeked from one slot, a driver's license from another. Charles Vaughan. A name that meant nothing to them but carried an air of importance. Haley exhaled, her fingers twitching toward the cash. "We could eat for weeks," she murmured. "Get a room for the night. Just one night, Ashley." Ashley closed the wallet with a snap. "No," she said, voice steady. "It's not ours." Haley let out a short, humorless laugh, rubbing her arms for warmth. "And? You think whoever this Charles Vaughan guy is going to starve if he loses a couple hundred?" She motioned at their surroundings, the damp, cracked pavement, the overflowing dumpsters, the skeletal remains of buildings abandoned long ago. "Look at us, Ashley. No one's coming to save us." Ashley met her sister's eyes. They were the same shade of deep brown, the same ones that had stared back at her in every dirty window, every puddle reflecting their thin, weary faces. But tonight, there was something else there, the slow, creeping acceptance of how the world had shaped them. She couldn't let that happen. "There's an address," Ashley said, pulling out a sleek white business card. The embossed letters spelled out Vaughan Industries, the address neatly printed below. "We give it back," Haley scoffed, kicking at a loose piece of brick. "And then what? You think he'll be so grateful he hands us a check? Gives us a warm bed? People like him don't even look at people like us, Ashley." "Maybe not," Ashley admitted, "but I won't steal. Not like—" She stopped herself, but Haley flinched anyway. Not like their mother. Silence stretched between them, heavy and unspoken. The wind picked up, carrying the distant hum of the city, the occasional wail of sirens. Somewhere nearby, the familiar rustling of movement in the shadows reminded them they weren't the only ones trying to survive these streets. Ashley stuffed the wallet inside her tattered hoodie and turned toward the main road. "Come on," she said. "If we hurry, we can make it before security locks the place down for the night." Haley grumbled under her breath, but followed. As they stepped onto the sidewalk, the city loomed ahead, towering buildings of glass and steel, neon signs flickering like artificial stars against a night too dark to feel real. The contrast was staggering. One world walked in polished shoes, rushing to appointments, sipping coffee in cafes. The others scurried in alleyways, unseen, forgotten. Their nights usually stretched out like endless tunnels of hunger and exhaustion. Some nights, they were lucky, finding a half-eaten sandwich in the trash behind a bakery, a few coins scattered on the pavement. Other nights, they went to sleep curled up in an alley, their stomachs aching, their bodies stiff from the concrete beneath them. And the worst nights, the ones where they ran. Ashley's grip tightened around the wallet at the memory. There had been a man last week. He had approached them near the abandoned bus station, his smile too wide, his voice too sweet. "You girls need a warm place? Some real food?" He'd reached for Haley's arm. Ashley had yanked her sister back before he could grab hold, and they'd bolted, weaving through back streets, climbing over rusted fences, lungs burning as the sound of footsteps chased them for blocks before finally fading. Now, she was beginning to wonder if returning this wallet was really about doing the right thing, or proving to herself that they weren't meant for a life of running. They passed a row of closed shops, the darkened windows reflecting their thin figures. Ashley barely recognized herself anymore. She had always been the strong one, the one who kept them together, but lately, she felt like she was unraveling. Haley must have sensed her thoughts because her voice was softer this time. "I just don't get why you care so much." Ashley exhaled slowly. "Because we're not thieves." Haley scoffed, but she didn't argue. Instead, she rubbed her arms for warmth. "Think the fancy guy's got a spare coat in that office of his?" Ashley almost smiled. "Doubt it." The neon glow of Vaughan Industries appeared in the distance, standing tall like a monument to a world that had no place for them. The closer they got, the more the city transformed. The broken sidewalks smoothed out. The streetlights here were brighter, casting their ragged shadows against sleek storefronts. The smell of urine and rotting garbage faded, replaced by the scent of expensive cologne wafting from the few remaining businessmen striding past them, never sparing them a glance. It was strange how the city could shift so abruptly. Just 10 blocks back, they had been walking past boarded-up windows, stepping over needles and broken bottles. Here, people walked with purpose, carrying designer bags and talking into wireless earbuds as if there was nothing beyond their world of meetings, dinners, and high-rise apartments. For a moment, Ashley wondered how different life would have been if they had been born into this part of the city instead. If they had grown up in warm beds with full stomachs. If their mother had never left. If their father had been... She stopped herself. Thinking like that never led anywhere good. "We're almost there," she said, shaking the thoughts away. Haley kicked a loose pebble across the sidewalk. "Bet they don't even let us inside. Probably think we're here to beg." "They can think whatever they want," Ashley said. "We're here to do the right thing." Haley sighed dramatically, but kept walking. As they reached the massive glass doors of Vaughan Industries, Ashley felt the weight of the wallet in her pocket like an anchor. Whatever happened next, she refused to let it define them. Even if the world saw them as nothing, they would prove, at least to themselves, that they were worth more than the streets that tried to swallow them. With one last breath, Ashley pushed open the door. The air inside the Vaughan Industries lobby was heavy with warmth, a stark contrast to the biting cold Ashley and Haley had left behind. It smelled like polished leather, fresh coffee, and the kind of wealth they had only seen through store windows. The marble floor stretched endlessly, gleaming under the high, vaulted ceiling. People moved with purpose, heels clicking, suits pressed to perfection, hands gripping briefcases and sleek phones. And then there was them. The second they stepped inside, conversations slowed. Eyes flicked toward them, sharp, assessing, laced with silent judgment. They didn't belong here. Ashley straightened her back, ignoring the whispers and the subtle shift of people moving away. Let them stare. She hadn't come here to be liked. A security guard spotted them almost immediately, his expression shifting from disinterest to annoyance. He moved toward them, his polished shoes nearly silent against the marble. "You lost, kids?" His voice was flat, uninterested. Ashley lifted her chin. "We're here to see Charles Vaughan." The man barely reacted. "And do you have an appointment?" Haley shifted beside her, the weight of the gazes pressing down on her. Ashley, however, held her ground. She reached into her hoodie, pulled out the sleek black wallet, and held it up. "We found this," she said. "It belongs to him." The guard glanced at it, unimpressed. "You could have left it at the front desk." "We need to give it to him personally." The guard exhaled through his nose, arms crossing over his chest. "That's not how this works, sweetheart. Hand it over, and we'll make sure he gets it." Ashley's fingers tightened around the wallet. "No." The tension in the room thickened. A woman in a tailored blazer glanced at them, lips curling slightly in amusement. Somewhere behind them, someone whispered, "Just another couple of street rats looking for a payout." The words stung, but Ashley didn't flinch. The guard took a step forward, reaching for the wallet. Ashley yanked it back. "Look," she said, voice sharp now. "We walked all the way here to return this. If we wanted to steal from him, we would have taken the cash and never come. But we didn't. That should count for something. For a moment, the guard just stared at her, his jaw tight. Then, a new voice cut through the space. "What's going on here?" The tone was calm, but commanding. Smooth, but with an edge that made people turn their heads. Charles Vaughan stood just beyond the security checkpoint, tall, sharp-eyed, dressed in a suit that probably cost more than Ashley had seen in her entire life. His dark gaze moved from the guard to the girls, assessing without emotion. "They say they found your wallet," the guard said, gesturing toward Ashley. Charles's brows lifted slightly. He took a step closer. Ashley held up the wallet again. "It's yours," she said. He studied her, then extended a hand. Ashley hesitated only a second before placing it in his palm. His fingers brushed against hers, smooth, well-kept, untouched by hardship. Charles flipped it open, checked the contents, then looked back at her. "You didn't take anything," he said. It wasn't a question. "No," Ashley said. For a beat, he said nothing. Then, in a voice unreadable, he asked, "Why?" Haley made a small, almost imperceptible noise, an exhale of frustration. "We're not thieves," Ashley answered. Charles studied her for a long moment. Then, with deliberate slowness, he slid the wallet into his pocket. "How much do you want?" he asked. Ashley stiffened. "We don't want money." Charles's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Mild interest, maybe. "No?" Ashley inhaled, steadying herself. This was it, the moment she had planned for. "We want you," she said. Silence. Charles's brows pulled together slightly, a rare show of emotion. "What?" "For 1 month," Ashley said, her voice unwavering. "Be our father." The room was dead silent. Haley turned her head sharply toward her sister, eyes wide, clearly caught off guard. The security guard let out a short, incredulous laugh. "Charles?" He didn't laugh. He didn't even blink. Ashley held her breath, watching him. She had expected shock, resistance, maybe even amusement, but Charles Vaughan just looked at her, his dark eyes sharp, calculating. "Explain," he said. Ashley swallowed. "We don't want money. We don't want charity. We just want to know what it's like to have someone who cares, even if it's just for a little while." Haley looked down, her jaw clenched. "We can take care of ourselves," Ashley continued. "We have for years. But people like you don't understand what it's like to have nobody. To sleep with one eye open, to run because there's no one to run to. You don't know what it's like to be looked at like we don't matter." She exhaled. "So that's what we want. Just 1 month. Just until we can breathe again." Charles didn't move. Haley shifted beside her, her shoulders drawn up tight, as if bracing for rejection. Finally, Charles's gaze flicked between them, assessing, considering. Then, with the same unreadable calm, he said, "You have 5 minutes to convince me why I should." The elevator ride was suffocatingly silent. Ashley and Haley stood against the gleaming steel walls, their worn-out hoodies and scuffed shoes stark against the luxury of their surroundings. The soft hum of the elevator was the only sound, except for the occasional click of Charles Vaughan's watch as he adjusted his cufflinks. He didn't glance at them, didn't offer them a single word since they stepped in. Haley shifted uncomfortably, stealing a glance at Ashley. Ashley didn't return it. She kept her eyes straight ahead, her hands clenched into fists inside the pockets of her hoodie. She knew they had minutes, maybe seconds, to make him listen before he dismissed them completely. The elevator doors slid open, revealing a vast office lined with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline. It was pristine, controlled, like everything about the man standing in front of them. A sleek desk sat in the middle, organized to the point of obsession. No clutter, no warmth. Charles strode in, unbuttoning his suit jacket as he moved, then turned to face them. "You have 5 minutes," he said simply. "Make them count." Hayley tensed beside Ashley. The weight of those words hung in the air, pressing against them like an invisible force. Ashley stepped forward. "You think this is a joke," she said, her voice even. "That we're just here looking for some handout, right?" Charles raised a brow. "Isn't that exactly what you're doing?" "No." Ashley's jaw tightened. "We don't want your money. We don't want some pity donation. We want a place where we don't have to sleep with our backs against a wall, just for a month. That's it." Charles exhaled, slow, calculated. "And why, exactly, would I agree to that?" Ashley met his gaze, steady, unwavering. "Because we've been running from men like you our whole lives." For the first time, something flickered in Charles's eyes. Not amusement, not irritation, something else. Hayley inhaled sharply, as if realizing where Ashley was going with this. But she didn't stop her. "We've spent years dodging people who see us as nothing more than easy targets," Ashley continued. "Some of them try to be nice first, offering food and a place to stay. But it always comes with a price." She didn't need to elaborate. Charles was a powerful man. He understood unspoken things. "There's one man in particular," Ashley said, voice dropping slightly. "Victor Hale. He's been watching us for months. We've been lucky so far, but luck doesn't last forever. Sooner or later, we'll be too tired to run, too hungry to fight back." She exhaled. "And when that happens, no one will even notice we're gone." Silence settled between them. Charles's expression didn't change, but there was a shift in the air. Something less rigid, less dismissive. "You expect me to believe that letting you stay with me will somehow keep you safe?" His tone was cool and measured, but the edge had softened. "It won't fix everything," Ashley admitted. "But it'll buy us time. 1 month where we don't have to sleep outside, don't have to look over our shoulders. 1 month where we get to be normal." Hayley finally spoke, her voice quiet but steady. "You're rich, powerful. People listen to you. If we're with you, they'll leave us alone." Charles leaned against his desk, arms crossing over his chest. He was watching them in a way that felt too careful, too dissecting, like he was trying to see beneath their words, beneath their desperation. "And then what?" he asked. Ashley swallowed. "Then we figure it out." For a long moment, there was nothing but the faint hum of the city outside. Charles's gaze flicked between them, his fingers tapping against his forearm in thought. Then he exhaled, long and slow, and said, 30 days. No more." Hayley's head snapped up, shock flashing across her face. Even Ashley blinked, as if she hadn't fully expected him to agree. "I have rules," Charles continued. "You follow them, or you're out. You don't steal. You don't lie. You don't cause problems for me." His voice darkened slightly. "And if I find out you're using me for some kind of scam, I will make sure you regret it." Ashley nodded, ignoring the cold prickle running down her spine. She didn't doubt him. "Fine," she said. Charles's gaze lingered on her for another second before he pushed off his desk. "I'll have someone prepare a room for you both." Just like that, it was done. Hope flickered in Ashley's chest, small, fragile, but real. She had spent her whole life learning that trust was dangerous, that survival meant keeping people at a distance. And yet, as she and Hayley followed Charles Vaughan out of his office, stepping into a world completely foreign to them, she couldn't shake the feeling that, for the first time in a long time, they weren't completely alone. Charles stood near the entrance of the building, phone in hand, waiting as his driver pulled up to the curb. The black sedan gleamed under the lobby's lights, its presence a sharp contrast to the two small figures beside him. He glanced down at Ashley and Hayley, their thin shoulders hunched slightly, hands tucked deep into their pockets. They weren't trembling, but there was a tension in their bodies, the kind that came from years of being ready to run. "Do you have anything to bring with you? Like clothes or anything else?" he asked, voice even. The girls exchanged a glance, a silent conversation. Then, in unison, they shook their heads. Nothing. Charles didn't react, but something about the simplicity of their answer made his jaw tighten. The hush in the lobby didn't go unnoticed. His employees were watching. Some tried to be discreet, eyes flicking over the scene before turning back to their work. Others weren't as subtle, a mixture of amusement, curiosity, and quiet disbelief. As Charles reached out, placing a firm but unhurried hand on Ashley's shoulder, leading them toward the waiting car, someone near the reception desk chuckled under their breath. "Looks like our boss is feeling generous today." Another voice, light with mockery, followed. "Or just in the mood for surprises." Charles ignored them. The doors of the car opened. The girls hesitated for only a moment before stepping inside. Then, without another word, Charles followed. The drive to Charles Vaughan's estate felt like stepping into another universe. The city's chaos slowly faded behind them, swallowed by endless stretches of tree-lined roads, luxury storefronts, and sleek cars gliding smoothly over pristine asphalt. The shift was unnerving, like watching the world transform through a one-way mirror, a reality they had never been part of. Ashley sat stiffly in the back seat, eyes flicking toward the window, where the skyline had disappeared, replaced by vast estates with iron gates and towering hedges. She could feel Haley beside her, silent, curled into herself, fingers gripping the hem of her hoodie. Neither of them spoke. Charles, seated in the front, barely acknowledged them. His focus was elsewhere, tapping at his phone between glances at the passing scenery. The driver maneuvered effortlessly, as if he had done this route 1,000 times. Then the car slowed. The estate loomed before them, a sprawling mansion framed by immaculate gardens, stone pathways, and high security gates that slid open without a sound. The sheer scale of it left Ashley momentarily breathless. It wasn't just a house. It was an empire. The driveway curved toward the entrance, where a grand staircase led to massive oak doors, carved with intricate patterns that probably held more history than she ever would. Haley exhaled softly. Holy crap. Ashley swallowed. Yeah. The car rolled to a stop, and the driver stepped out to open their doors. Neither of them moved immediately. Charles finally turned his head, studying their hesitation with unreadable eyes. "Are you getting out, or do you plan on sleeping in the car?" His voice was calm but edged with something firm, something that told them this was a transaction, not a welcome. Ashley was the first to move. Survival meant adapting. They had asked for this, so they would take it. Haley followed, her steps smaller and hesitant. The moment they stepped inside, the warmth engulfed them. Everything was vast, the marble floors polished to perfection, the high ceilings adorned with chandeliers, the kind of silence that wasn't empty, but carefully maintained. The air smelled of something unfamiliar, clean linen, fresh flowers, maybe even a hint of cinnamon from a candle burning somewhere. A woman appeared from the hallway, dressed sharply in a tailored black uniform, a soft clipboard tucked under her arm. She moved with quiet efficiency, eyes flicking over them with the same calculating expression Charles had. "Are these the guests?" she asked, glancing toward Charles. "For the next 30 days, he replied. Her lips were pursed, but she said nothing, nodding briskly. "I'll show them to their rooms." Ashley and Haley exchanged a glance. "Come," the woman said, already turning toward the grand staircase. They followed, their footsteps too loud against the quiet elegance. Upstairs, the rooms stretched endlessly, one hallway leading to another, doors shut tight with secrets they would never uncover. Finally, the woman stopped before a set of double doors, pushing them open with a smooth motion. The room inside was nothing short of surreal. 2 massive beds, wrapped in thick, inviting blankets, framed by dark wooden headboards. A fireplace flickered quietly on the far wall, filling the space with a golden glow. A window the size of an entire wall overlooked the garden below, its glass reflecting their stunned expressions. "You'll be staying here," the woman said simply. "The bathroom is through there." She motioned toward an open door, revealing a sleek, marble-covered space with a shower larger than any shelter they had ever seen. Hayley's fingers curled into the fabric of her hoodie. Ashley kept her face neutral, but inside, she was unraveling. "This isn't real," Hayley whispered under her breath. Ashley felt the same. The woman gave them one last assessing glance. "Dinner is at 7. Don't be late." Then she left, heels clicking against the floors until the sound disappeared. Silence. For the first time in years, they were standing in a place that wasn't cold, wasn't temporary, and wasn't something they had to flee from in the middle of the night. Hayley hesitated before stepping forward. She reached out. Slowly, cautiously, and let her fingers brush against the blanket of one of the beds. She flinched, as if afraid it would vanish under her touch. "It's real," Ashley said quietly. Hayley didn't answer. Ashley exhaled, turning toward the table near the fireplace. There was a plate of food waiting, fruit, sandwiches, a pitcher of water. Her stomach twisted. She grabbed one of the rolls and, without thinking, slipped it into her pocket. Hayley saw. She didn't say anything, but her shoulders dropped slightly, and Ashley knew she understood. They had been given a roof, a bed, warm food. But things like this never lasted, and if this world turned against them again, they had to be ready. The scent of freshly brewed coffee filled the air as Ashley followed Hayley down the staircase, the grand dining room revealing itself in all its intimidating splendor. The long oak table stretched across the room, set with fine china, polished silverware, and steaming plates of food that looked too pristine to touch. A massive window overlooked the garden, sunlight pouring in through the glass, casting warm golden hues over the setting. It felt like a scene from a life that didn't belong to them. Charles sat at the head of the table, skimming something on his tablet. A cup of coffee rested near his hand, untouched. If he noticed their presence, he didn't show it, not immediately at least. Ashley hesitated, her instincts screaming at her that this was a test, a game she didn't know the rules to. She glanced at Hayley, whose shoulders were drawn up in a familiar, uncertain posture. Then, with quiet steps, Ashley grabbed a plate, not bothering to sit, not bothering to meet anyone's gaze. She took the first available seat by the wall, away from the main table, her body angled instinctively toward an exit. She didn't need to be told what to expect. Shelters had rules. Sometimes you got lucky, and they let you eat in peace. Other times, if you took too long, if you sat in the wrong place, if you made the mistake of thinking you belonged, someone reminded you that you didn't. So Ashley hunched over her plate, eating quickly, her fingers moving on autopilot. Stay small, stay unnoticed, be ready to run. A chair scraped against the floor. Her shoulders tensed before she even looked up. Charles had moved, not to scold her, not to send her away, but to sit beside her. Ashley's grip on her fork tightened. He didn't say anything, didn't even glance at her. He simply sat there, drinking his coffee, scanning the news on his tablet as if this was the most natural thing in the world, as if she wasn't some stray waiting to be thrown back out. Minutes passed. The tension didn't leave Ashley's body, but she forced herself to slow her chewing, to breathe. Hayley, still standing near the table, watched everything. Then, for the first time, she chose a seat, not by Ashley, but at the actual table, across from Charles. Slowly, carefully, she reached for the toast, breaking it into small pieces. She still wasn't entirely comfortable, but she wasn't frozen either. It was a small thing, but Charles noticed. "You don't like eggs?" he asked casually, still scrolling through his screen. Hayley stiffened, not in fear, but in surprise, as if she hadn't expected him to speak directly to her. Her voice was hesitant. "I like eggs." Charles flicked his gaze up for the first time. It was so brief, but it held weight. "You didn't take any," he pointed out. Haley stared at her untouched plate. She hadn't even realized it. There was no accusation in Charles's tone, just an observation, and maybe something else, something Ashley couldn't quite place. Haley hesitated, then, without looking at him, she carefully took a piece of egg and placed it on her plate, a quiet victory. Ashley, watching the exchange, clenched her jaw. She wasn't stupid. This was how it started. The slow unraveling. Charles hadn't yelled, hadn't given orders, hadn't acted like every adult who had looked at them like a burden, and that was exactly why it was dangerous. People were predictable when they were cruel. You knew when to run. But people like Charles, the ones who didn't react, the ones who didn't tell you what they were thinking, they were harder to read. Ashley tested him after that. The next few days, she pushed little things. She left a cabinet open, didn't wipe the counter after using it, and muttered under her breath when he walked past. Tiny provocations. Waiting. But Charles never raised his voice, never scolded her. It was frustrating, infuriating even. One morning, she deliberately moved something from his desk. A small paperweight, barely noticeable, but shifted just enough to be out of place. Later that afternoon, she passed his office. He was sitting at his desk, the weight returned to its proper place, his hands resting calmly on the surface. His gaze flicked to her, but he said nothing. Ashley's stomach turned uneasily, because if he wasn't reacting, it meant he was waiting too. And that scared her more than anything. The house was too quiet at night. Ashley wasn't used to silence like this, the kind that felt heavy instead of empty. On the streets, there was always noise. The distant hum of traffic, the occasional shout from an alley, the rustling of people shifting in their sleep under cardboard blankets. But here, in this massive house with its spotless floors and endless hallways, silence stretched in a way that made her uneasy. She padded barefoot down the stairs, the chill of the floor biting at her skin. She hadn't meant to wake up, but thirst had pulled her from sleep, and now she was making her way toward the kitchen, half expecting someone to stop her. She passed the grand hallway, moving toward where she remembered the kitchen was, when she noticed it. A single light spilling from under a door. Charles's office. The door was slightly ajar, and through the crack she saw him, sitting at his desk, one hand resting against his temple, the other scrolling through something on his laptop. Papers were scattered across the polished wood, a half-empty glass of whiskey beside them. He looked different, less composed, less untouchable, just a man lost in his own thoughts. Before she could stop herself, Ashley pushed the door open a little wider. "You should go to bed." Charles's head lifted sharply. He hadn't heard her approach. His eyes, usually so sharp, so unreadable, blinked in surprise. "What?" Ashley leaned against the doorframe, arms crossing. "You should sleep. That's what normal people do at night." Charles stared at her, and for the first time since she'd met him, he looked genuinely caught off guard. A long silence stretched between them. Then, the faintest ghost of a smile. "You're giving me advice now?" His voice was quieter than usual, missing its usual edge. Ashley shrugged. "You're gonna look like a zombie in the morning." Charles exhaled through his nose, shaking his head slightly. There was something unreadable in his expression, something almost too soft. "Noted," he murmured. Ashley shifted. "Good night, I guess." She didn't wait for a response before disappearing toward the kitchen. Charles watched the door swing shut behind her. It had been a long time since anyone had told him to take care of himself. Leave information about the weather where you live in the comments section below if you're listening to this. Haley sat cross-legged on the couch, eyes fixed on the screen as bright colors flashed across it. The soft hum of an animated movie filled the spacious living room, a contrast to the usual stillness of the house. The plush blanket draped over her lap was one of the many small luxuries she was still getting used to. Across the room, Ashley was folding clothes. Not new ones. Not yet. The worn-out fabric of their old hoodies, their threadbare shirts, told a story of too many nights spent in the cold, too many mornings waking up stiff and sore on hard ground. She smoothed out the wrinkles as best she could, but some things couldn't be fixed. Charles watched them from the doorway, his eyes lingering on the pile of faded clothing Ashley was carefully stacking. Something about the sight made his chest feel too tight. "We're going shopping," he announced. Haley twisted around, blinking at him in confusion. Ashley stilled, hands gripping the shirt she was folding. "What?" Ashley asked, cautious. Charles stepped further into the room. "You need new clothes." Haley's fingers curled into the blanket. "We have clothes," she said quietly. Charles glanced at the frayed cuffs, the stretched-out fabric that barely held its shape anymore. He shook his head. "You have rags." Ashley's expression darkened, her shoulders tensing. "We don't need—" "Yes, you do." Charles's tone left no room for argument. "Get your shoes on." The sisters exchanged a look, one of those silent conversations they always seemed to have. Then, without another word, Haley slipped off the couch and Ashley sighed, reluctantly setting down the clothes. Walking into the high-end shopping center felt like stepping into another planet. Everything was too bright, too polished. People walked past in sleek coats, their hands clutching shopping bags filled with things they didn't have to think twice about buying. The air smelled of leather and expensive perfume. Ashley and Haley moved carefully, as if stepping out of line would get them kicked out. Charles walked ahead of them, leading the way with the same easy confidence he carried everywhere. The difference was, he belonged here. The girls did not. A saleswoman approached them almost instantly, her smile polite but too sharp, too practiced. She barely glanced at Ashley and Haley before turning to Charles. "How can I help you today, Mr. Vaughan?" Charles gestured toward the sisters. "They need clothes. Everything." The woman hesitated, finally sparing a glance at Ashley and Haley. Her eyes flicked over their worn hoodies, their cheap sneakers, their hesitant postures. She smiled again. This time, it was forced. "Of course. Right this way." The fitting room felt too big, too empty. The pile of clothes they had been given was too much. Haley sat on the bench inside, staring at the untouched items beside her. Soft sweaters, jeans with actual buttons instead of elastic bands, warm coats lined with fleece. She swallowed, looking at Ashley. "I don't know what to pick." Ashley hesitated, then picked up the plainest, cheapest sweatshirt she could find. "This," she said. "Just this." A knock on the door made them jump. Charles's voice came through, calm but firm. "You're not leaving until you pick more than one thing." Ashley scowled, pressing her lips into a thin line. Haley whispered, "What if he changes his mind later?" Ashley exhaled through her nose. That was the problem, wasn't it? Nothing was ever permanent. Charles was waiting for them when they stepped out, their arms holding only 2 outfits each. He gave them a long, unimpressed look. "I told you to get what you need." "This is what we need," Ashley said flatly. Charles folded his arms. "No, it's what you think I'll let you have." Haley shifted uncomfortably. Ashley's jaw tightened. Then, Charles exhaled slowly, rubbing his temple. He had expected this. "Fine," he said, before waving over the saleswoman. "Bag everything in that fitting room." Both girls whipped around to stare at him. "What?" "No," Ashley said, eyes wide. "You don't get to decide that," Charles replied, already handing over his credit card. Ashley opened her mouth to argue, but nothing came out, because, for the first time, someone had looked at them, at their struggle, and instead of offering them the bare minimum, had said, "Take more. Take everything." She didn't know what to do with that. The cashier scanned their items, bagging them neatly. Ashley wasn't paying attention. She was adjusting her grip on the bag, shifting her weight. "Hey, Dad, can we—" The words left her mouth before she could stop them. Time froze. The second she realized, her stomach dropped. Haley turned, eyes wide. Charles, who had been casually pulling out his wallet, paused. Ashley's throat tightened. "I mean—" She scrambled, heat rushing up her face. "Never mind." Silence. Charles said nothing, didn't react, didn't correct her. He just handed his card to the cashier like nothing had happened. And somehow, that made it worse. Ashley burned with the mistake, her fingers curling into her palms. She shouldn't have said that. She wasn't stupid. She knew better. They weren't family. This wasn't real. It was 30 days, nothing more, and she needed to remember that. Later that night, Charles found himself standing at the doorway of their room. The soft glow from the bedside lamp bathed the room in a warm light. Haley carefully folded her new sweater as Ashley shoved her hoodie into a drawer like she couldn't stand the sight of it. Charles almost turned away. But then, Haley shifted, her voice sleepy and small. "These have been the best days of my life." Charles froze. Haley turned toward him, blinking heavily. "Thank you, Charles." Then, before he could react, she reached up and pressed a small kiss to his cheek. Charles stared. For a man who was used to negotiations worth billions, who had built an empire from cold calculation and strategy, he had never been caught off guard like this. He cleared his throat, unsure what to say. Haley was already asleep. His eyes flicked to Ashley. She was watching him, unreadable as ever. Something tightened in his chest. Without another word, he reached for the book on the nightstand and sat down. He wasn't sure when it had happened, but somehow, without his permission, this had started to feel like home. The morning air was crisp, laced with the scent of damp pavement and fresh earth. The 1-month deal was coming to an end, and neither Ashley nor Haley wanted to acknowledge it. Haley had woken up with a plan, a simple one really, a gift for Charles, a thank you for the past few weeks, for the warmth, for the food, for the quiet moments where, for the first time in their lives, they felt like they belonged somewhere. Ashley and Haley stood at the edge of the garden, their hands brushing against the delicate wildflowers growing along the path. They wanted to do something for Charles. A gift, something small but meaningful. "He probably gets expensive gifts all the time," Haley murmured, picking at a blade of grass. Ashley shrugged, a rare smile tugging at her lips. "Yeah, but not from us." They had never really thanked him, not properly. He had given them warmth, a place to sleep, clothes that didn't fall apart at the seams. He had let them stay. And now, with their time in his house nearing its end, Ashley wanted to leave behind something real. It wasn't much, but wildflowers didn't cost anything. Slipping out unnoticed was easy. They had spent years making themselves invisible. The city pulsed with life as they walked along the sidewalk, scanning the streets for the perfect spot to pick a handful of flowers. The wind carried the scent of freshly brewed coffee and rain-damp pavement, blending with the distant sounds of traffic. Haley spotted a cluster of purple and yellow blossoms growing along the fence of an empty lot. "There," she said, reaching for Ashley's sleeve. They darted forward, bending down to pluck a few stems, laughter slipping between them in soft, unfamiliar waves. And then, a scream, a sickening crash of metal against metal. Tires screeched, glass shattered. A car swerved too fast, then another. Everything happened at once. Ashley turned, the world twisting into chaos around her. People were shouting. Horns blared, brakes shrieked. The scent of burning rubber choked the air. A truck jackknifed in the middle of the intersection, slamming into another vehicle, sending it spinning. And then, Haley's scream. Ashley reached for her, too late. Something heavy struck her side. Her body lurched backward, pain exploding through her ribs, her skull crashing against the pavement. The world tilted. She couldn't breathe. Somewhere nearby, Haley whimpered. Ashley tried to move, but her limbs felt wrong, like they weren't hers anymore. The street was hot beneath her, sticky, wet, blood. Her chest heaved, but nothing filled her lungs. Haley. She turned her head, pain splintering through her skull. Haley was there, barely a few feet away, curled in on herself, her tiny frame trembling. Her hands were clutching at her stomach, fingers soaked in red. Ashley's vision blurred. This wasn't supposed to happen. She had promised. She had always protected Haley. And now, her fingers twitched against the pavement, reaching. She heard sirens, shouts. The world was pulling away, and in that moment, before the darkness came, Ashley thought of Charles, of the warmth of the fireplace, the sound of him reading in his low, steady voice, the weight of Haley's laughter when she curled up beside him, safe for the first time in years. The soft hum of the television at night, Haley pressing into her side, whispering that this had been the best time of her life. She thought of calling him Dad, of the way it had felt right, even when she knew it shouldn't have. Then, the world faded, and Ashley let go. Charles Vaughan was in the middle of a meeting when his world cracked apart. The boardroom was filled with the low murmur of investors, a projected spreadsheet casting shadows across the sleek mahogany table. Charles sat at the head, his fingers resting lightly against the arm of his chair, listening, or pretending to. His phone vibrated once in his pocket. Then again. Annoyance flickered across his face as he pulled it out. His assistant had strict orders not to interrupt during meetings unless it was urgent. Unknown number. Frowning, Charles answered. Vaughan. A pause. Then, a voice he didn't recognize. Mr. Vaughan, this is Mercy General Hospital. We have 2 minors here under your name. His heart stopped. The room blurred. What? His voice was sharp, cutting. There's been an accident. Ashley and Haley... The rest of the words didn't register. Car crash. Critical condition. Internal bleeding. Charles was already standing. His chair scraped against the floor as he shoved away from the table. The eyes of his board members followed him, confusion rippling through the room. "Where are you going?" someone asked. "Meeting's over," Charles said, his voice clipped, distant. One of the executives scoffed. "Excuse me? We still have—" But Charles was already gone. His hands were shaking as he pressed the phone closer to his ear, striding toward the elevator. "Are they alive?" he demanded. The doctor hesitated. Then, "For now." Charles's pulse roared in his ears. He stepped into the elevator, pressing the button so hard his knuckles turned white. "Hold on," he thought, gripping his phone like a lifeline. Just hold on. The moment Charles burst through the hospital doors, the world narrowed to a singular purpose: finding them. The smell of antiseptic burned his nostrils, mixing with the distant hum of beeping machines and hurried footsteps. The hospital was too bright, too sterile, and yet somewhere in these halls, his girls were fighting to stay alive. Where are they? His voice was sharp, his tone edged with something raw and unfamiliar. Fear. A nurse flinched, but quickly recovered. "Sir, I need you to—" "Where are they?" A doctor in blue scrubs approached, clipboard in hand. He looked exhausted, his face lined with the kind of weariness that came from delivering bad news too often. "Mr. Vaughan?" Charles nodded once, his throat too tight to speak. "They were brought in 20 minutes ago. Both sustained severe injuries. We're doing everything we can." Charles clenched his fists. What happened to them? The doctor hesitated. Ashley took the brunt of the impact. Her ribs punctured a lung. She has multiple fractures, her spine, her collarbone, and internal bleeding. We're stabilizing her, but... The doctor's voice softened. "It's bad." Charles felt something inside him crack. "And Haley?" His voice came out hoarse. "She's stable but critical. The impact caused liver failure, and..." The doctor sighed, rubbing his temple. "Her corneas were damaged beyond repair. She's going to need transplants." Charles took an unsteady breath. Transplants. A new liver, new eyes. His mind reeled, grasping for anything, any solution. "I'll pay whatever it takes. Find a match." The doctor exchanged a look with one of the nurses. "That's the problem, Mr. Vaughan," he said gently. "Their blood type is extremely rare. It could take months, even years, to find a suitable donor." Charles stilled. The sounds faded, drowned beneath the ringing in his ears. "We do have one potential match," the doctor continued cautiously. "Ashley." Charles's pulse slammed against his ribs. "If Ashley were to donate part of her liver," the doctor went on, carefully choosing his words, "Hayley could survive." Charles's breath left him in a sharp exhale. "You're telling me I have to choose?" Silence. The doctor looked away. That was answer enough. His legs felt unsteady, the weight of the decision crashing down on him. He had spent his life making impossible choices, but nothing like this. Nothing like choosing which of his daughters would live. "You don't have to decide now," the doctor said quietly. "But Hayley's condition is deteriorating. If she doesn't get a transplant soon, we might lose her." Charles dragged a hand down his face, his world spinning out of control. A nurse touched his arm gently. "You can see them now." Ashley Payne. It was everywhere. Ashley wanted to move, but her body refused. Her lungs burned, each breath sharp and unbearable. The distant beeping of machines pulsed in her skull, but she couldn't open her eyes. Hayley. Where was she? Her fingers twitched weakly, reaching for something, anything. She wanted to go home. Not the streets, not the shelters. Home. Charles's house. She thought of the way the fireplace flickered in the evenings, the scent of fresh linen when she sank into bed, and the weight of a book in Charles's hands as he read them to sleep. She thought of Hayley curled up beside her, giggling at some cartoon, and of Charles's quiet presence as he pretended not to watch them. She thought of the way he had started to feel like family, and now she was slipping away. A tear slid down her cheek. I can't leave her. Darkness swallowed her whole. Hayley. It was cold. Hayley's body felt wrong, like pieces of her had been taken away, leaving her hollow. She tried to open her eyes, but nothing came, only darkness. Panic surged through her. Ashley! Her voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. No response. Her stomach twisted, an ache that wasn't just from the pain in her body. Footsteps. Someone was there. A hand, warm, familiar, gently took hers. Hayley! She knew that voice. Her lips trembled. D. Charles? I'm here, he said, voice steady, but there was something broken beneath it. She swallowed. I can't see. Charles's grip tightened. I know. Tears burned behind her useless eyes. Where's Ashley? A pause. Too long. Hayley's stomach dropped. She's still fighting, Charles said finally. Hayley turned her face toward where she thought he was, gripping his hand with every ounce of strength she had left. Don't let her go, she whispered. Charles's jaw clenched, the weight of the choice suffocating him. But he didn't say anything, because, for the first time in his life, he didn't have an answer. Charles sat in the dimly lit hospital corridor, his elbows resting on his knees, fingers laced together so tightly his knuckles had turned white. His mind was in a chokehold. His phone vibrated again. Another call from work, another executive demanding his attention. He didn't even glance at the screen. Instead, he switched it off and tossed it onto the empty seat beside him. Nothing else mattered. Not the business. Not the empire he had spent years building. His hands found his hair, gripping it as he bent forward, elbows digging into his thighs. His breath came out sharp, ragged. He had been through high-stakes deals, court battles, and takeovers that had made grown men tremble. But this was something else. He was about to walk into a room and ask a child to die. His child. Charles squeezed his eyes shut, his jaw tightening. How could anyone expect him to do this? For a moment he thought about just not going in, about sitting there, pretending time wasn't running out, pretending there was some miracle waiting around the corner. But there wasn't. Finally, he forced himself to stand. Each step felt heavier than the last. When he reached Ashley's room, he hesitated at the door. His heart hammered in his chest, a foreign kind of fear crawling up his spine. The kind that had nothing to do with losing money or power, but losing something irreplaceable, something he had never realized he had until now. He inhaled sharply and stepped inside. The room was too quiet. Machines beeped in slow, rhythmic intervals, their soft sounds counting down the time he had left with her. The fluorescent lights overhead cast a dull glow over Ashley's fragile frame. Charles had seen her strong, stubborn, defiant. He had seen her glare at him, push his patience, challenge him in ways no one else ever had. Now she just looked small. Her bruises had deepened into ugly purples and blues. The oxygen mask over her face fogged slightly with each weak breath. Her body barely moved, except for the slow, shallow rise and fall of her chest. Charles swallowed hard. Then her fingers twitched. She was awake. Slowly, her eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first. Then, as they landed on him, a small, tired smile curved her lips. "Charles." Ashley's voice was barely a whisper, fragile, like a breath caught between worlds. He swallowed hard. "I'm here." She managed a weak smile, one that shattered him. Then she looked past him, her eyes drifting around the room, looking for something. No, someone. "Haley?" Charles took a sharp breath. She already knew. She had always been too smart, too perceptive. His throat felt raw as he forced the words out. "She's stable, Ashley. But..." His voice broke. He cleared his throat, trying again. "She needs a transplant." Something shifted in her eyes. Understanding, realization, acceptance. She didn't flinch, didn't panic, just closed her eyes for a moment, exhaling softly. Then she whispered, "Take it." Charles's entire body tensed. "What?" Ashley opened her eyes again, and this time tears slipped down her bruised cheeks. "Take it. I know we have rare blood type. It can only be me," she repeated, her voice trembling but firm. Charles shook his head. He couldn't do this. He had made impossible decisions in boardrooms, played games of power and strategy. But this was something he couldn't navigate. "You don't understand." "I do." Her fingers curled slightly around his, weak, barely there, but still holding on. "It's okay." Charles's vision blurred. "It's not okay, Ashley." Her lips trembled. "She's my little sister." A breath, a pained, shallow breath. "She's always been my responsibility." "No." Charles's voice was sharp, but it broke at the edges. "You're just a kid, Ashley. It's not your job to..." "But it is." Her fingers tightened slightly around his. "If you were me," she whispered, "if you could save her, wouldn't you?" Charles inhaled shakily. Would he? He thought of Haley, her small hand gripping his at the hospital, her voice trembling as she begged him not to let Ashley go. He thought of Ashley, always standing in front of her sister, shielding her from the world. He closed his eyes. "Yes," he whispered. Ashley let out a tiny breath of relief. Her voice cracked. "I just wish I had more time." Charles pressed his forehead to her hand, his entire body shaking with silent, helpless grief. She was just a child. She was his child, and he couldn't save her. Ashley swallowed hard. "Promise me something." Charles lifted his head, his eyes red, his throat raw. "Anything." Ashley took a trembling breath. "Take care of Haley. Don't let her be alone. Not yet." Charles couldn't answer, because no words could carry the weight of what she was asking. Instead, he nodded, and Ashley smiled, a real, heartbreaking, brave little smile. "Thank you," she whispered. Her eyes fluttered closed. Charles held her hand tighter, as if that could keep her here, as if that could make this choice any less impossible. Hayley's small fingers curled around Ashley's, clutching desperately, unaware of what was coming. They were lying on 2 trolleys side by side in front of the operating room. "You have to get better," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "We'll leave together, okay?" Ashley smiled weakly. She didn't have the heart to tell her the truth. The doctors moved quietly around the room, preparing for surgery. Their faces were composed, professional, but Charles could see the truth in their eyes. They knew. This wasn't a surgery to save Ashley. It was to save Hayley. Charles knelt beside her bed, his hands trembling as he brushed a strand of hair from her forehead. "You're so brave," he murmured, voice cracking. "More than anyone I've ever known." Ashley's breath was shallow, her eyelids heavy. "I'm scared," she admitted, so quietly he barely heard it. Charles's chest tightened painfully. "Me too," he whispered. Her fingers curled slightly around his. "Will you stay?" Charles swallowed hard, his throat raw. "I'm not leaving, sweetheart." A small, relieved exhale. "Good." The doctors exchanged glances. It was time. Charles held her hand until the very last moment. Then slowly, Ashley's breathing grew softer, slower, until her fingers slipped from his grasp. Charles didn't move, didn't breathe, because for the first time since she had entered his life, Ashley was truly gone. The operating room doors swung shut, sealing Ashley away. Charles stood frozen outside, his fingers clenched into fists, nails digging into his palms so hard it hurt. The fluorescent lights overhead felt too bright, too cold, casting long shadows against the white hospital walls. Somewhere beyond those walls, his little girl was slipping away. Hayley, unaware of the truth, lay in a separate room, her small fingers curled around a hospital blanket. She had fallen asleep still holding Ashley's hand, whispering promises that they would leave this place together. She had no idea that Ashley had given her that future at the cost of her own. Charles exhaled sharply, dragging a hand down his face. His entire body felt numb, but his chest ached in a way he had never experienced before. A nurse walked past, her expression somber, but no one stopped him. No one knew what to say. Minutes blurred into hours, and then the silence came. A doctor approached, his posture heavy with what he had to say. Charles already knew. "I'm sorry, Mr. Vaughan." The words were soft, as if gentleness could soften the blow. "We did everything we could." Something inside him broke. His ears buzzed, drowning out the doctor's words. A numbness spread through his chest, but beneath it, something deeper, something unbearable. She was gone. Ashley was gone. Hayley wakes up. It was dark. Hayley's body ached, but the first thing she noticed was the absence. She reached out instinctively, her fingers brushing against the empty space beside her. Ashley's bed was cold. A strange tightness coiled in her chest. Slowly she turned her head, expecting to see Ashley curled up beside her, blinking sleepily. But she wasn't there. "Ashley?" Her voice cracked in the stillness. The beeping of the machines felt louder, suffocating. Footsteps echoed outside the room, and then Charles. The moment she saw him, she knew. His suit was rumpled, his face pale, his eyes hollow in a way that terrified her. He looked lost. Hayley's breath quickened. "No." Her voice trembled, her fingers clutching the sheets. "No, no, where is she?" Charles's throat worked, but he couldn't answer. Hayley shook her head violently, panic rising. "She's okay, right? She said we'd leave together. She promised." Charles sat beside her, his hand reaching for hers, but she pulled away. Hayley's heart pounded, her vision blurred with tears. She couldn't breathe. "She should have lived," she sobbed. "She should be here, not me." Charles flinched like she had struck him. "No," he said, his voice thick with something raw. "Don't say that." Haley shook her head again. She always protected me, always made sure I was okay, and now she's gone and it's my fault. Charles pulled her into his arms before she could say anything else. Haley fought it at first, her body stiff, her sobs violent. But then, slowly, her fingers curled into the fabric of his suit. She shook against him, small, fragile, utterly broken, and Charles, who had always been so composed, so untouchable, held her like she was the most precious thing in the world. "She saved you, Haley," he whispered into her hair, "because she loved you. This wasn't your fault." Haley sobbed harder, and for the first time since Ashley left, Charles let himself cry with her. The adoption papers sat on Charles's desk after a month later. Haley nervously sitting next to him. He had signed his name without hesitation. It was never a question. Not anymore. Haley was his daughter. She had lost a sister, but she wouldn't lose him. Not now, not ever. The legal documents meant little in comparison to the promise he had made to Ashley. He would raise her, protect her, give her the life both of them deserved, because he was their father, even if it had taken losing Ashley to realize it. "She'd probably call me a crybaby for this," she murmured, wiping at her eyes. Charles's lips twitched, something aching but fond in his expression. "She'd say it's okay to cry," he corrected softly. Haley exhaled shakily. "Yeah, maybe." Charles placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "She's not gone," he whispered. Haley turned her face up to look at him. His gaze remained on the headstone, but his voice was sure, stronger than it had been in weeks. "She's always with us." Haley swallowed past the lump in her throat. And then, for the first time in a long time, she leaned into Charles's side. She didn't pull away when his arm wrapped around her, holding her close. They sit there together, two people bound by loss, by grief, but also by love. And now, hand in hand, Haley no longer saw Charles as just a billionaire. He was her father. And finally, she was home. The seasons had changed, but the ache never truly left. A full year had passed since Ashley's death. Some days it still felt like yesterday, like Haley could turn her head and find her sister sitting beside her, grinning, teasing, alive. Other days, it felt like a lifetime ago, but she had survived. Haley adjusted the strap of her backpack as she walked out of the school gates. The weight of the books felt normal now, something she never thought she'd have. School had once been a dream, something for kids who had homes, futures. Now, it was her reality. She wasn't the same scared girl who had flinched at kindness, who had thought survival was just about getting through the next day. She was stronger. Not because it had been easy, God, it had been anything but easy, but because she had chosen to be. And through it all, Charles had been there, waiting for her at the curb. Haley spotted the sleek black car before she saw him, leaning against the passenger side, arms crossed, eyes scanning the crowd. When he saw her, his expression softened, something that had become second nature to him now. "How was it?" he asked as she climbed in. Haley buckled her seatbelt. "Fine." Charles smirked. "You say that every day." She shrugged, but a small smile tugged at her lips. Truthfully, it was more than fine. She was thriving. She had friends now, had learned to laugh again, had let herself believe that she deserved more than just survival. But she still missed Ashley. And today, Ashley's birthday, was harder than most. Neither of them spoke much during the drive. They didn't need to. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was shared. The wind whispered through the trees as they walked toward the headstone. It was simple, but beautiful. The polished stone bore Ashley's name, the dates marking her far too short life. A small engraving beneath it read, "Loved forever, never forgotten." Haley knelt, placing a bundle of wildflowers against the base of the grave. Ashley's favorites. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small envelope. "Hey, Ashley," she whispered, unfolding the paper. Her voice wavered, but she kept going. "I started school, like we always talked about. It's hard, but I'm doing okay." She paused, glancing at Charles before continuing. "I have a home now, a real one." She swallowed, blinking against the burning in her eyes. "I miss you every day, but I'm trying. I promise, carefully." She folded the letter and tucked it beneath the bouquet. She let out a slow breath, staring at the name carved into the stone. It still hurt. It always would. But she was here, and she was living. That had to count for something. Charles placed a hand on her shoulder. Haley looked up at him, searching his face. "She's not gone," he murmured. "She's always with us." Haley nodded, letting the words settle into the cracks of her heart. Then, for the first time in a long time, she smiled. Not just because Ashley would want her to, but because finally, she believed it. As they walked back toward the car, Charles's arm wrapped around her shoulders, holding her close. And for the first time, Haley didn't feel lost anymore. She had a father, she had a home, and she had a future. No matter how much she missed Ashley, she wasn't alone. Not anymore. If this film touches your heart, leave your mark with a like, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel to explore more meaningful stories with us. And if you enjoyed this story, please share it with your friends on WhatsApp. And now, share your feelings with us and tell us your own stories. Every word you share is a building block that helps create our strong and enduring community. Together, we'll create a warm space where everyone can share and connect. Finally, don't miss the incredible stories coming your way soon. We're always here to bring you the best selections, full of deep values, yet entertaining. See you there.